Good day. This is Russell Hawley coming to you from the Tate Geological Museum at Casper College. And today I'd like to talk to you about the differences between nautiloids and ammonites. Now, nautiloids, you might remember from one of our previous episodes. These are cephalopods related to octopus and squid, and they are the only cephalopods in the ocean today that live permanently in an external shell. So this is what the shell of a modern nautiloid looks like. The head and the tentacles poke out of that aperture like that when it's alive. But although this is the only shelled cephalopod today, in the age of dinosaurs, there was another large and successful group of shelled cephalopods called the Ammonites. And they thrived for many millions of years and became extinct at the same time that the dinosaurs did. This is an example of an ammonite right here. This is Dactylioceras, which is found throughout Europe, and in life would have looked something like this. So as with the Nautilus, it has a head with tentacles growing out of its face, coming out of that aperture there. That all rots away and leaves nothing after the ammonite dies, and all that survive to the present day are these hard shells. Incidentally, this kind of shell design is called a serpenticone because it resembles, in shape, a little coiled up snake. The first people in Ireland to find serpenticone ammonite shells didn't realize they were the remains of ancient sea creatures at all, and they thought they were snakes that had been turned into stone through the magic of St. Patrick. At any rate, in a nautilus, the shell is divided up into air chambers with a series of interior walls called septa. Once again, you might recall this from the previous episode. This one's been cut in half a little bit off center, so you can't see the siphuncle, but if it had been exactly divided right down the middle, you would be able to see that tube running right through the center of each one of the septa, the siphuncle. Now, ammonites also had a siphuncle, and presumably it served much the same purpose, but it was in a different position. Here's what an ammonite shell would look like cut in half. And instead of the siphuncle going through the center of each septum, in an ammonite, it went around the edge. And we've got an ammonite shell right over here that has been cut in half, so you can see that for yourself. So here are the chambers, now filled with calcite crystals, but back when it was alive, that would have been filled with gas to provide flotation. And here, running along the outer edge of the shell, you can see that siphuncle, not running through the center of each septum, but around the periphery. And that identifies this as an ammonite rather than a nautiloid. Now, another difference between the two groups is the complexity of the sutures, where the outer edge of the septum met the inner wall of the shell. So in a nautilus, it's relatively simple. Each septum is shaped more or less like a contact lens. And so the place where that internal septum meets the shell is gently curved, not very complex at all. But throughout the evolution of the ammonites, they developed ever more complex sutures as the interior walls got wiggly around the edges. So they weren't shaped like a contact lens, they were shaped more like a lasagna noodle. In the goniatites, it acquired a zigzag sort of pattern, as we see here. In the ceratites from the Triassic period, it would have gotten wavy, like you see in this diagram. And then finally, the ammonitid ammonites that thrived during the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods had very, very complicated sutures indeed. You can just barely see those complicated wavy sutures in this section of coiled ammonite shell right here. And here is the straight-shelled ammonite Baculites. On this side, we've got the outer shell still preserved, but it's come off on the other side to reveal the sutures where those interior septa met the outer edge of the shell and produced some very complicated patterns indeed. One other difference between ammonites and nautiloids is that the Ammonites got quite a bit bigger in some species than any of the coiled-shelled nautiloids did. This is Dunveganoceros, and this one's only a baby. The full-scale Dunveganoceros is about this big across, but even that's not the biggest of them all. The largest ammonite, Parapuzosia bradleyi, got up to the size of a monster truck tire.